My dad asked me one simple question: "Where's your car?" And I didn't realize that answering it would expose the control, manipulation, and pressure I'd been living under from my husband and his mother, or that it would change my life forever. Welcome to Betty's Magical Stories, where real-life moments turn into powerful stories of love, loss, courage, and truth. If you enjoy emotional stories that stay with you, you're in the right place. My dad looked at me from across the kitchen table, his coffee already going cold in his hand, and he asked the question so casually that it almost didn't register at first. He said, "Where's your car?" Not in an accusing way, not suspicious, just curious, like a father checking in on his daughter's life. I opened my mouth to answer with something simple, something normal, something that wouldn't unravel everything I'd been holding together for months. But nothing came out. Because the truth was, I didn't have a simple answer anymore.
I laughed awkwardly, brushed it off, and said something vague about my husband using it. But my dad didn't move on. He tilted his head, the way he always did when he sensed something was off, and he said, "You've been saying that a lot lately." And that's when my chest tightened, because that's when I realized how long I'd been lying to everyone, not just him, not just my family, but myself.
You see, the car wasn't just a car. It was independence. It was freedom. It was the last thing that still felt like it belonged to me. And now even that was gone. A few months earlier, my husband and his mother had started bringing it up casually. At first, it sounded reasonable, practical even. "Why do you need your own car?" my mother-in-law asked one afternoon, sitting on my couch like she owned it. "You're married now. Families share things." My husband nodded along, barely looking up from his phone. I remember thinking it was just a conversation, a suggestion, something we could talk through later. But later turned into pressure. Pressure turned into arguments, and arguments turned into a slow, quiet erosion of my boundaries. They said it didn't make sense financially. They said insurance was expensive. They said it was selfish for one household to have two cars when one would do. And every time I tried to explain that I used it, that I needed it for work, errands, or even just to clear my head, they'd look at me like I was being dramatic, like I was clinging to something childish. My husband started phrasing it differently. "Why are you so attached to it?" he asked one night. "Normal wives don't need to go out all the time." That sentence stayed with me. Normal wives, as if there was a rule book I'd missed, as if my need for autonomy was some kind of flaw. Eventually, they stopped asking. They started assuming. One morning, I woke up and the car was gone. No warning, no discussion, just gone. When I asked my husband about it, he said his mom needed it, and it made more sense for her to use it since she actually appreciated it. I remember standing there in my pajamas, keys useless in my hand, feeling something snap inside me. From that day on, I had to ask to go anywhere. Grocery store, doctor, even to see my parents. Sometimes the answer was yes, sometimes it wasn't, and sometimes it came with conditions. Be back by this time. Don't waste gas. Tell me exactly where you're going. So when my dad asked me where my car was, all of that flooded back at once. Every compromise I'd made, every time I'd swallowed my discomfort to keep the peace, every moment I'd convinced myself this was just how marriage worked. I finally said it. Not all at once, not dramatically, just quietly. I said, "They've been pressuring me." My dad's face changed instantly. The warmth drained out of it, replaced by something sharper, something protective. He asked, "Who's they?" And I said, "My husband and his mom." The room went silent. My mom stopped washing dishes. My dad set his cup down slowly. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't interrupt, he just listened. And as I talked, I realized how bad it sounded when I said it out loud, how abnormal it was, how small my world had become without me even noticing. I told him about the car disappearing, about needing permission, about being told I was overreacting, and the more I spoke, the more my hands shook, because deep down, I knew this wasn't just about transportation, it was about control. My dad finally said, "That's not pressure, that's not normal, that's not okay." And hearing that broke something open inside me, because until that moment, no one had said it so plainly. I'd been doubting myself for so long that I needed someone else to name it for what it was. He asked me if I was happy. I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because I was afraid of what the answer meant. My husband wasn't always cruel. My mother-in-law wasn't always harsh. But the constant monitoring, the dismissing of my feelings, the slow stripping away of my independence, it had all become my new normal. My dad asked if I wanted my car back. I said yes, without hesitation. And that scared me too, because it showed how much I'd been suppressing what I wanted just to survive.
That night, when I went home, my husband immediately noticed something was different. I wasn't as quiet. I wasn't apologizing for existing. And when he asked where I'd been, I told him I'd seen my parents. I told him my dad knew about the car. His face hardened instantly.
He said I'd embarrassed him. He said I'd made his mother look bad. He said family matters should stay private. And that's when it hit me. Privacy was just another word they used to keep me silent. I went to bed that night staring at the ceiling, replaying my dad's question over and over. "Where's your car?" Such a small sentence, such a big crack in the illusion I'd been living in. Because once someone asks the right question, you can't unsee the truth. And that's where everything started to change. The next morning felt heavier than usual, like the air itself knew something was shifting. My husband barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was clipped and cold. His mother was already in the living room when I walked out of the bedroom, sitting in her usual spot, scrolling on her phone like she owned the space. And maybe, in her mind, she did. She didn't look up when she said, "So I hear you told your father about our business?" That word again. Our. As if my life had somehow become community property. I told her calmly that my dad asked a question, and I answered honestly. She scoffed and said honesty didn't mean dragging family issues outside the house. My husband stood behind her, silent, arms crossed. That silence hurt more than if he'd yelled. It told me exactly whose side he was on. Then she said something I still hear clearly to this day. She said, "A married woman doesn't need so much freedom. It leads to problems." I felt my stomach drop. Freedom, problems, like they were interchangeable. Like my independence was a threat that needed to be managed. I told them I wanted my car back. Not forever, not dramatically, just that I needed it. My husband laughed, not because it was funny, but because he didn't think I was serious. He said, "You're being influenced by your parents. This is why couples shouldn't involve outsiders." Outsiders? My own parents. That's when I realized something terrifying. In his mind, marriage hadn't added to my life, it had replaced it. Over the next few days, things escalated quietly. My mother-in-law began forgetting to leave the car when I needed it. My husband started checking my phone more often, asking who I was texting, why I was smiling, why I seemed distant. When I said I was just thinking, he told me thinking too much was dangerous. Dangerous? For who? I started documenting everything in my notes app. Times, dates, what was said, what was taken. Not because I had a plan, but because somewhere deep down, I knew I might need proof one day. That scared me. When you start collecting evidence in your own marriage, my dad called me one afternoon while I was alone in the house. He didn't pressure me. He didn't tell me what to do. He just said, "You always have a place here." And for the first time in months, I cried freely, not quietly, not into a pillow, out loud, because I'd forgotten what safety felt like. That night, I asked my husband directly if he trusted me. He hesitated. That hesitation said more than any answer. He said trust wasn't the issue, obedience was. He didn't use that exact word, but that's what he meant. He talked about respect, about roles, about how his mother had sacrificed everything for her family and how I should learn from that example. But I wasn't trying to replace his mother. I was trying to be myself. The argument ended the way they always did, with me apologizing just to stop it. But this time, the apology tasted bitter, hollow. I knew I didn't mean it. A few days later, my dad showed up unannounced. That alone told me how serious things had become. My husband was furious, said my father was crossing boundaries. But my dad didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult anyone. He simply asked one question, looking straight at my husband. "Why doesn't my daughter have access to her own car?" There was no good answer, and the silence that followed was louder than any argument we'd had. My mother-in-law tried to intervene, saying I was sensitive, that I misunderstood, that everything they did was for my benefit. My dad nodded politely and said, "Then it shouldn't be a problem to give it back." That's when my husband snapped. He accused my dad of poisoning me against him. He said I'd changed. And he was right. I had. Because once you see control for what it is, you can't pretend it's love anymore. That night ended with my dad telling me to pack a bag. "Just a small one. Come stay with us for a few days," he said. "Clear your head." My husband said if I left, I was choosing my parents over my marriage. And standing there, bag in my hand, heart pounding, I realized how unfair that choice was. I wasn't choosing sides, I was choosing myself. When I walked out, my mother-in-law said, "Don't expect things to be the same when you come back." And for the first time, that didn't scare me. Because maybe the same was the problem. This is Betty's Magical Stories, where every story has meaning. If this touched you, like and subscribe. In the next part, I'll share what happened the morning after, when silence turned cold, accusations were made, and I was forced to choose between obedience and myself.